Did Mercedes Moné just make a huge mistake by turning on the very fans who supported her throughout her career? That's the big question wrestling fans are now asking after what many are calling one of the most shocking promos she's ever delivered. Moné, the superstar formerly known as Sasha Banks, has been blazing a trail ever since she left WWE. Whether in Japan or AEW, she's been making waves, stacking up wins, collecting championships, and making herself the face of a new era in women's wrestling. But just before what was supposed to be the biggest match of her AEW run, a World Championship showdown at All in Texas against timeless Toni Storm, she did something no one saw coming. She went live on Instagram and mocked her longtime supporters, calling them crybabies for wanting her back in WWE. She said, "Oh, I miss Frybaby. You can watch Mercedes Moné every single week on AEW Dynamite, and in 10 days, you can watch me at All In when I become the AEW Women's World Champion. Thank you." A bold statement, no doubt, and while that could be interpreted as part of her heel persona, the tone and timing rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Was it just character work? Or was there something more personal buried under those jabs? She wasn't done either. On that same live stream, Moné doubled down. She made it very clear that she's no longer interested in her WWE past. In fact, she told fans to stop calling her Mercedes Hogan, a nickname that played off the idea of her being a dominant presence across companies. Instead, she said she should now be referred to as Mercedes Omega, in honor of Kenny Omega's belt-collecting legacy. That wasn't just a nickname, it was a statement. She wanted everyone to know that she's building something entirely new and doesn't want to be compared to anyone else. But to fully understand the backlash that followed her comments, you have to rewind and look at her journey. Back in May 2022, Sasha Banks was one of WWE's top stars. Alongside Naomi, she held the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but reports began surfacing that both Banks and Naomi were frustrated with how the women's tag team titles were being treated. They felt their reign wasn't being given the respect it deserved and the creative direction was going nowhere. So in a moment that shocked the entire industry, they walked out of Monday Night Raw, leaving their titles on the desk of then head of talent relations John Laurinaitis. Just like that, they were gone. Sasha Banks would disappear from the WWE scene entirely, re-emerging months later under a new name, Mercedes Moné. Her first stop was New Japan Pro Wrestling, where she wasted no time reminding everyone just how elite she is in the ring. And then came her AEW debut, a move that lit up the internet. AEW had just secured one of the biggest names in modern wrestling, and Moné instantly became one of the pillars of their women's division. She came into AEW like a force of nature, putting everyone on notice. By the time All in Texas rolled around, Moné had built up an incredible resume in the company. She entered the event as one of the most protected stars on the roster. Her resume for 2025 was already impressive. She began the year as the reigning TBS champion, a title she had won at Double or Nothing in May 2024. That title reign became one of the most dominant in AEW's recent history. Match after match, defense after defense, Moné solidified her status as the boss, not just a name, but in how she carried herself and the stories she told in the ring. On top of that, she entered the Owen Hart Foundation tournament and had a hell of a run. In the first round, she defeated Julia Hart in a match that showcased both athleticism and ring IQ. It was the first of many steps in a march to the finals. In the semis, she went up against Athena on the spring breakthrough episode of AEW Dynamite and came out victorious in what was considered one of the better matches of the tournament. That win set her up for a huge showdown against Jamie Hayter at Delore on May 25th. Moné won that match too, earning herself a shot at the AEW Women's World Championship at All in Texas. That's where the drama really started heating up. With a championship opportunity in hand, Moné turned her focus squarely onto timeless Toni Storm, the reigning women's world champion. These two couldn't be more different. Storm, with her vintage Hollywood persona, and Moné, with her modern, flashy edge. Their rivalry started simmering in subtle ways. On the June 4th episode of AEW Dynamite, Storm was in action during a tag match, and Moné didn't sit ringside or at commentary like most challengers. No, she chose to sit at her own private dinner table, eating a steak while the champion wrestled. It was the ultimate sign of disrespect, a literal show of how little she cared for Storm's reign. Things escalated a week later on the June 11th episode. Storm had just picked up a win over Julia Hart when Moné struck again. She attacked Mina Shirakawa, Storm's ally, and then brawled with the champion herself. This wasn't just two wrestlers hyping up a match. This was personal. Their final face-to-face confrontation before the big title match dissolved into chaos. A full-blown pull-apart brawl broke out on the go-home show, adding even more fuel to their already intense feud. The anticipation for their match at All in Texas was at an all-time high. But when the dust settled, it wasn't Moné standing tall. In what Tony Khan later called a five-star classic, Moné came up short. Timeless Toni Storm retained her title in what many fans called the match of the night. And just like that, Moné's undefeated streak in singles matches in AEW was snapped. The timing couldn't have been worse, especially after her now infamous crybaby remarks. Suddenly, what had sounded like confidence came across as arrogance. And for some fans, her comments weren't just insulting, they were personal. Because let's be honest, a lot of fans followed her journey after WWE. They watched her debut in Japan. They cheered her AEW arrival. They supported her in every major moment. And while it's understandable for wrestlers to play up their heel persona, there's a fine line between working the crowd and alienating them entirely. Moné may have crossed that line, and if she ever plans to return to WWE, which is something that seems almost inevitable, she may have to answer for those words. Because wrestling fans have long memories. They remember who rode with them and who turned their back. Despite the backlash, Moné's 2025 hasn't been a failure. Far from it. Her run as TBS champion has been one of the most memorable reigns in the title's history. She's brought attention, prestige, and consistent high-level matches to a belt that sometimes gets lost in the shuffle. And even though she lost to Toni Storm, it was a competitive bout that only elevated both women. AEW may have lost a streak, but they gained a rivalry that could define their women's division for the rest of the year. And there's no telling what Moné's next move will be. Will she go after Toni Storm again? Will she double down on her heel persona and push the fans even further away? Or will she start to walk some of her comments back now that the reality of defeat has set in? There's also the looming possibility of her one day heading back to WWE. And if that day ever comes, the WWE Universe is not going to forget the way she mocked them just because they missed her. That's the gamble Mercedes Moné took. She bet everything on herself, went full throttle, and made a statement. And that's part of what makes her such a compelling figure. She's not afraid to stir the pot. She's not afraid to challenge her own legacy. But sometimes, those bold moves come with consequences. And for now, Moné finds herself in unfamiliar territory, having to bounce back from a high-profile loss, rebuild goodwill with a fanbase she pushed away, and re-establish her place in the AEW women's division. Whether you love her or hate her, Mercedes Moné knows how to stay relevant. Her words sting because they carry weight. Her losses matter because she's built herself up to a level where every match feels like an event. But one thing is clear, calling your fans crybabies, especially the ones who supported you when you walked out of WWE, is a risky move. And when you lose the biggest match of your AEW career right after saying it, people start talking about karma. The real question now is, what's next? Will Mercedes Moné learn from this moment and use it as fuel? Or will she double down and isolate herself even more? Either way, the wrestling world will be watching. Let us know what you think in the comments. Was she just doing her job as a heel? Or did she let her ego take the wheel? And don't forget to like and follow for more wrestling news and updates.